Hello, a very warm welcome to Fireside Chats. I am Magla Pillai, and today we will be taking up the subject of the will factor. Everyone has a will, whether you realize it or not, and our speaker today, Sister Denise, an experienced practitioner of Raja Yoga meditation, will be taking us through this subject to help us understand what will is and how we can apply this knowledge to our daily lives. In this series, we look at a variety of subjects surrounding spirituality and, more importantly, how one can deepen one's relationship with God. Sister Denise, a very warm welcome to today's show.
Thank you.
The will factor. What does that mean? It's a very interesting way of phrasing the title.
Will. You can also talk about willpower. What is exactly the will? To apply your will to something. People speak about, there has to be the political will to get some policy put into effect. It is a force that you bring to bear on circumstances to make them happen. The will. It's to do with your power. And so, it's a very important thing to talk about.
Is it, Denise, free will? Does it also fit into this picture?
Free will is interesting. I think people are a lot less free than they think.
Okay, that's cryptic. Say more.
We speak about free will. People believe in freedom. And so when you talk about freedom, you also talk about free will. I choose to do this, therefore I'm doing it, but there are other very hidden factors which interfere with that freedom. And this is why I say you're not as free as you think, because there are factors like your karmic accounts. There are factors like what is the strength of your will in comparison with the strength of the obstacles that you are encountering or are going to encounter, and maybe your will is not strong enough, in which case it's going to limit your freedom.
Sister Denise, when should a human being learn to exercise their will? And one can exercise will in various contexts, can't you? You can exercise it as regarding your body, regarding your mind, regarding your career, regarding your choice of partner, your choice of how you see God and how you communicate with God. How does one go about exercising one's will in all of these various departments, especially if you're born into life circumstances where you don't even know you have such a choice?
Well, I think there's a difference between choice and will.
Oh, you do?
Yes.
Okay, tell us what that is. Because there are many who use those two terms interchangeably.
Right.
Okay.
To me, a will is a force. And you say, okay, I will do this. And somebody else comes along and says, no, you will not. And so it's not really a choice. It's a matter of whose will is stronger. Mm-hmm. So I look at will in terms of personal strength. And choice is that there are choices. And some people, they don't realize that they have the choice, and then in that case they need the education to know you do have the choice, you have to make the choice, you have to apply your will to the process of making a choice. So I still feel there's a difference between making a choice and applying your will. The other area where you hear about will is in addiction,
in
addiction.
Addiction, okay, yes.
Because
sorry, can I interrupt you there, Sister Denise? Any type of addiction?
Yeah.
Okay, proceed.
Any kind of addiction is described as a disease of the will, because you decide to not pursue that addiction, but it is stronger than you, so you are unable. So that means that your will is weak. And you hear sometimes about people being weak-willed, where they ought to do something by applying their will and they just don't because their will is too weak. And that's a little bit connected with this whole question of an addiction connected with a diseased will. If you have somebody who's strong-willed, they decide, this is what I'm going to do, and they will just push through any number of obstacles that may be in the way. So there would be the sign of a strong will. I choose to do this, and you do not brook any opposition, you see. In terms of spiritual practice, it's very good to develop the will, because you need to apply your will, which is connected with determination that this is what I'm going to accomplish. And there may be resistances, there may be obstacles, oppositions to prevent you. But if your will is strong, then you will actually get through all of those things. So I think that, okay, you make a choice, but to actually fulfill your choice, there's this whole other energy of will that you apply to it.
Okay. Now, Sister Denise, one can't wake up one fine day and decide, I will now exert my will with full gusto. There are a lot of virtues and qualities that stand behind somebody who has a weak will, and conversely somebody who has a strong will. Isn't that so?
Yes.
Okay. So how do you establish where you are at in the first place, and if you realize, and it's a difficult thing to come to terms with, that you are weak-willed, how do you develop it so that you're a person of strong will? How do you make the transition?
First of all, I think that you can wake up one morning and say, okay, I think I'm going to have to exert my will on this situation.
Okay, which means that you realize that thus far you haven't been as strong as you would have liked to have been.
Maybe that, or maybe you just didn't get it, that it's a matter of applying your will. Maybe you thought, things will just happen by themselves, and they don't. You need to apply your will. That means you have to go inside and collect your strength. There is something called coming into your power.
Yes.
And I think that's connected with your will. Because once you have found your power and aligned yourself, then you claim your power, you apply your will. This is what I'm going to do. It's also connected with being very clear. So, several things come together there. When you're doing the right thing, and when you're following your conscience, by right thing, I mean you're doing actions which are having positive consequences for you. You are actually accumulating a certain power, and that power can, I think, be called willpower. Because as you accumulate it, you start following your conscience, doing the right thing. Gradually something is happening, and one fine day it's as if you're able to grab a hold of it and really start to live your life the way you want to, rather than being sort of at the mercy of circumstances and the goodwill of people and things like that. So it is almost as if it's one day to the next.
Mm-hmm.
Because perhaps there's a critical mass or a critical moment where you just make that shift from weak to strong.
Okay. Okay. And Sister Denise, the virtues behind somebody with a strong will, what will their makeup be like, their personality makeup?
They'll have a lot of faith in themselves. And
That's
they'll
a beautiful quality, to be able to have faith in yourself.
I think also they'll be very clear about what they want to do, and they will have a lot of faith that their discernment is right, and they go for it. You know, all these things line up. The person will not have self-doubt. They will not vacillate. They will not ask people, is this right, is that right? You know, they will be so with themselves that they'll go for it. And I mean, it can be a negative quality. You do hear people say, oh, this is a very willful person. That means they insist on doing the wrong thing, and they do. So if your willpower is lined up with a good power of discernment and a clear view of what's in front of you, and your conscience and everything, that's really good. But you know, a lot of people go off in the idea of being convinced that they're right, but it's not anything other than an ego problem. And so if you have a strong will and a big ego problem, that's a problem for everybody else.
I'm glad you mentioned that, because my next question is it ever okay to exert your will on another human being? And by that I mean person's A's life is going this way and you think it should go this way. Is it ever okay to do that?
Well, I mean, you have to look at it case by case, but I think that you know, if a person's life is going in totally the wrong direction, you using your will to make them go in another direction is probably not going to be strong enough. And by the way, it's also not your business.
By the way, yeah, except that one of our favorite pastimes is to stick our nose in other people's business, is it not?
That's not a good thing to do. That is not the dignity of a high quality person.
Yeah, that's powerful. Yes. You know, Sister Denise, the reason I asked you this question is because if it's a loved one, whether that person is 20 or, I don't know, 70, we think, you know, I want to do what's best for my sister, my father, my grandfather, and so I will decide that they should do this because, well, I just think I'm right and they're wrong.
The thing is this, you can suggest, there's this expression, you can, you know, take a horse to water, but you can't make him drink. And I think that, yeah, you can say, okay, this is what I think is a good idea, but then it's up to the person.
You stated earlier that one can wake up one fine day and decide that I need to exert my will in a stronger fashion because I'm not happy with the way I exerted my will in the past. Okay? Explain to me on a practical level, not thought but in reality level, what does it take to not just think it but put it into effect in your life? In certain cases, the exertion of one's will requires some behavioral change.
Well, yes.
Is it a question, Sister Denise, of sitting down and thinking it, you know, from beginning till end, or just say, I've decided now I'm leaving home, I'm walking out of here, and I'll see where I'll go. How far should you go in your decision-making process?
Well, it's very individual, very much case by case, but you know, you have to analyze your situation and see, you know, what we call the past, present and future. Have a look at the trend of things, you know, and is it going where you want to go? And if you don't do anything about it, it's going to go over here. So then it's your responsibility. So, taking this into your hands and saying, I choose not to go there, you have to use what we call in Brahma Kumari's firm, determined thought.
On a previous episode, you mentioned the 8 powers that one acquires in the practice of Raj Yoga meditation. Which one of those 8 powers or more would you use in this, in the exercise and the increase of your will?
Well, I think a very important one would be the power to face.
Would it be, Sister Denise, facing yourself, or would it be facing another person that you're referring to?
It depends on the situation. You may have to face the fact that another person is exercising their will to prevent you from going where you have to go. So your will has to be stronger than their will. And you have to take that decision, make that decision, you see. Because, there are conflicts that occur in this world, and somebody says it's got to go this way, somebody else wants it to go the other way. It's clash of will, but it's also sometimes a clash of ego, you see. So you need to discern very well what's going on, and for yourself, you need to face what's happening. It could be that you are going out of line and you have to face that. It could be that someone else is forcing you to do something against your will, and if you don't gather together your will and do something that's more forceful the other way, you're going to be in big trouble. So these things involve really getting clear about who you are and where you are, and then making a strategy and then going there. And so this thing of firm determination is very powerful, and you have to be very clear, getting yourself ready to, move. It's like moving a huge bulldozer. Nothing will get in its way. It's very strong. So you have to be sure what you're going to apply this to. And you don't have to do it very often in your life, but when it's an important moment, yes.
So Denise, when one has to face the fact or come to terms with the fact that you have either a weak will or a strong will, the one thing that you would also have to face is your own weaknesses that also come into play. No human being has just one strength, and conversely, no human being has just one weakness. There's an entire bunch of both weaknesses and strengths that we have. So, how does one, in the cauldron of weaknesses, decide I need to exert my will, but what do you do with other aspects of your dark side? Because one weakness leads to another weakness. If you, I want to say it in this context. The reason one could not have exercised one's will in the past is because of fear. Fear is a huge issue for a number of people as far as the exertion of their will is concerned.
Well, the thing is this: if you're afraid, and the consequences of your fear is this, and if you gather together your strength and face your fear, then that consequence is shifted and you go in a different direction. So, it's up to you. You want to save yourself or not. Sometimes you have to face your fear.
Do you want to save yourself or not? Is that the criteria one uses?
Well, I'll tell you something. Every so often in my life I've been in situations where it's either me or you who's going to survive. And I've always found that I choose myself. And I think that I'm quite comfortable with that, because there are times where, it's kind of almost like a Russian roulette situation. And I think to come down on the side of the self is a good thing, because ultimately you're an eternal, immortal soul. And if you don't root for yourself, you're done for. And so if you discover that when push comes to shove, I take care of me, I think that's a sign of a strong will.
Okay, now Sister Denise, God is inviting God into one's life a sign of strong will?
I think inviting God into one's life is a sign that you are ready to put aside your ego.
Let's talk more about that. To what extent does one's ego limit you as far as your freedom to think and act is concerned? Well, can you ever be free as long as you have ego?
I think that very often the ego will masquerade as the will.
Oh, an example of that is, I want this,
in a way,
I want
yes.
that,
Yes,
but
yes.
it's the false I.
Yes, it is.
Okay, so
And so then when the ego is masquerading as the will, to me that's a sign of the weak will, you see.
how do you know, Sister Denise, that when you say, I want to go in this direction in my life, I want to choose this person to spend the rest of my life with, I want to move to this country, how do you know that it's free will and not ego? Because you've got to be very, very discerning to know the difference. And it doesn't necessarily come in the form of a thought process. It can come in the form of a feeling. This feels right. It could be 100% wrong, but it could feel right because of ego.
What we learn in Raj Yoga is you may have an inspiration, and it feels good, this feels right, okay, we'll call that an inspiration. That inspiration has to be validated, backed up. You have to maybe consult someone who is someone you respect, someone who may know about that particular situation. Sometimes a person will not, very often, usually, nobody will make a decision for you, but they may say, well, have you thought of this and have you thought of that? So I think that, inspirations are great, but then you have to make sure that they are backed up by sort of common sense and realism, and that you've really checked out all the various other considerations to confirm that it's not just a nice idea,
Mm-hmm.
Because if it is just a nice idea, then you can say, well, that's the ego masquerading as the will.
Okay, you mentioned God, and I interrupted you. We digressed into the subject of ego. Coming back to God and free will.
Well, there's free will insofar as you will exercise your will, but then there's also destiny. And God will be kind of watching to see how well you are able to discern, is the way open for you or not, because there are moments where you literally have free choice. But there are not many moments, and you have to, when you're in front of a moment of free choice, you have to really think, because your free choice can put you into a trap or your free choice can keep you along a road which is taking you really to where you want to go. So this is where I think that, to consult with God, to consult with a wise person can be helpful to maybe modulate that unrestricted freedom that you feel at that particular moment where it is there, because that window can open wide and you can think it'll always be open wide, but it slams shut right away, and then whatever choice you have made, you can't go back. So your choices need to be modulated with wisdom.
Okay, that's a lovely note on which to end. Thank you. So, our choices need to be modulated with wisdom. That sounds like a bumper sticker that one could put at the back of one's car. So, I don't recommend you go that far, but what I do recommend is that you take some time and reflect on what Sister Denise has shared today, because there's 4 decades of spiritual practice behind it. Free will is not necessarily something that we consider and think about all the time, but practically every juncture in our lives requires the making of a decision. And if you're weak, your decisions will not be in your favor. They may possibly harm you. And if you're strong, then the exertion of free will work in your favor. So a very powerful message from Sister Denise, and I hope this has been of some benefit to you and your life. Thank you for joining us, and I hope to see you soon. Goodbye.